big hello and a very warm welcome to a special show. I'm joined today by a very interesting person. It's none other than Rajeev Samant, the founder of Sula, the man who made Sula wine available to the masses of India. And I'm right here at the beautiful Sula Vineyards. Thank you so much for joining us, Rajeev. Truly
It's
a pleasure.
my pleasure.
A lot has been said about Sula, but I want to really go back and backtrack and really walk the nostalgic zone and talk about, when you were a Stanford graduate, you're very well educated, pedigree education.
Thank you.
You then got a job in Oracle, I believe. And then I don't know what happened one fine day. It was not like you were like a wine connoisseur or anything of the sort. So you were a regular guy.
Yeah, no, nothing like that at all.
So this is really, at some level, an inspirational story for young people who want to do something off-kilter. So really, if you could talk about what were you thinking when you quit your job? Because a lot of people first would find it hard to quit their jobs.
Well, Stanford is one of those places where entrepreneurship is in the DNA.
Okay.
So it was one of those things. I landed up at 18 years of age in California at Stanford in Silicon Valley. And from there until the age of 25, I spent 7 years there. 5 years at Stanford getting 2 degrees and then working in Silicon Valley. All you saw around you was fantastic examples of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
And they are not afraid to take risks there. That has now come to India.
Okay.
In the last 10 years, you have that same kind of, I can do this,
Sure.
just trying whatever and not afraid to fail. And the ecosystem of funding and all of that, now you have it in India.
Yep.
Back then you didn't have it in India, but you had it there. It was the crucible
Right.
of that kind of, vibe. And so I really imbibed that. And I was sitting there in Oracle, it was a great job. I was the youngest manager in their finance department.
Okay.
But something was missing. I was sitting there at my computer, looking out the window at Highway 101 below, and I said, one life to live. Let's do something so cool, something that I can look back on and say that, wow, I really did something, I really achieved something and something different.
Right.
And that's why I decided to quit and come back to India.
But I want to talk a little bit about your family upbringing. For instance, if you're upper middle class, or I don't know if you were from a wealthy family, but if you're upper middle class, usually what is basically conditioned into you is that you need to have a steady job.
Sure.
You need to get your monthly fix of income.
Yeah.
You can't be very out there and very bohemian in your thought process. So
Absolutely, that was the way. We did come from a background where we were not very wealthy, but definitely upper middle class, but in a very different way. My father was a first generation entrepreneur.
Okay.
So he had already done this journey. He was born in Nasik, right here.
Okay.
And he came to Mumbai and he was working for like Mahindras and companies like that, and he chucked it all up at about the same age that I did finally.
Okay.
And he embarked on his journey that took him on a very successful entrepreneurial journey. And
Okay.
I was born in this entrepreneurial family, even though we are Maharashtrian.
Sure.
There are no Marathi entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was just one of those things, and that also made a big difference.
So, okay, you quit this cushy job of yours where you were doing rather well for yourself. And then what happened?
So I took a year off.
Okay.
That was the most important thing for me because, again, the whole thing about one life to live, there's so much to see in this beautiful
You
world.
seem to be very Western in the way you led your life. Like nobody takes a year off in India.
But
it's not the culture.
That's so silly. It's such an amazing world. It's such an amazing country. What do you see? You see the city that you grow up in, and maybe a few places. Now, of course, people travel a little bit more. Maybe you'll go to Goa. Maybe you'll go to Rajasthan.
Sure.
But just look at what there is to see right here, and you learn much more of life experiences when you travel, and especially when you travel alone.
But did you have
As
to
a
convince your
man,
parents?
it's easier. No, I didn't have to ask them anything. I was
Okay.
very independent.
Okay.
From the age of 15, I pretty much did what I wanted, and I didn't ask my parents for too much approval.
Okay.
So I strapped on a backpack and I decided to go see the world. I went to Mexico. I went all over the Western US. I went to Thailand, and then finally I landed up in India. I was riding ST buses up and down the coast, and went up to the mountains and saw it all. And I learned so much about myself during that time.
Okay.
How I wanted to live, what I wanted to do, and I knew that I wanted to live in nature.
I believe this grand idea of doing something in Nasik at this very place happened at a family wedding.
Yeah, absolutely. So we came over here to Nasik. I didn't know much about Nasik. I'd come here like once or twice, you know, as a kid.
It wasn't like your hometown or anything?
No, not at all. I'm
Okay.
pretty much a
boy.
Bombay guy, born and bred. So we came here for a family wedding, and my dad said, you know, during a break in the wedding, Rajeev, come with me. I want to show you something. And we came right here, and it was a small piece of land. We owned maybe 5 acres.
Okay.
And we were with the estate agent. My dad wanted to sell the land. And the guy said, 30,000 rupees an acre. And I said, what? I mean, even at that time, I looked around and I saw the beauty. There was nothing here. It was just grassland, grass this high, cobras, rabbits, you know, leopards used to come by every once in a while, and it was completely wild. There was no electricity, there was no telephone line, nothing. But I saw something so beautiful, and I said, why would you sell this beautiful land? I didn't even know you had it at 30,000 rupees an acre. I said, you know what? This is the spot. I want to do something here. I want to become a farmer. I'd come out to Nasik during the week. I started planting mangoes, tomatoes, all sorts of things, just seeing what would work.
Right.
Nothing worked. And on the weekends, I would be in Bombay, you know, I'd be sitting in the Bombay gym bar and they'd say, Rajeev, what did you say you were doing? And then they would all laugh into their beers, you know.
Sure. Okay, so you had like a series of flop shows with what you were growing or cultivating.
But all of them were teaching me something. And that's the classic journey of an entrepreneur.
So, you know, you looked around, you saw grapes, and then you had your Eureka moment where you thought, you should start cultivating grapes. Am I right?
That's right. You know, Nasik was a place where 90% of India's grapes come from. So you had vineyards all over, but not a single wine grape. All the grapes were for eating and for raisins. So I just said that, hey, what's going on here? And of course, you know, coming from California, I had started tasting a little wine, though I got to say that my preference at that time was gin and tonic. And I said that, hey, why is it that you have all these vineyards and no wine? And that was really the aha moment. I said, okay, I'm the guy. I'm the guy who's come here with a purpose. I'm going to make the first wine in Nasik.
This was what, 1998?
This realization came to me around 95, 96.
96.
Yeah.
At 96, what was really the, per capita wine consumption in India?
Well, you know, even now, it's a tablespoonful
Okay.
per person per year.
Okay.
Then it was less than a teaspoon
Right.
per person per year, just to put it into a very
Perspective,
easy
yeah.
perspective. Yes, as opposed to France, where it's 40 liters per
Wow.
person per year. Yes,
Okay.
and even the UK and the US, where it's over 10 liters
Right.
per person per year.
So given that,
Yeah.
then, right, in 96, when you had this grand realization, weren't you a bit scared? Firstly, it's India. We're not very sophisticated in our, in our taste. So we're cultivating it. Wine was an alien drink. It was a drink of the elitist. Didn't you think it was a very risky business proposition?
Yeah, sure, but there's something in my mental makeup, maybe because of the way I saw my dad, you know, grinding through the early years until he was finally successful, several times coming on the brink of failure and then finally, you know, building a nice company. So risk was something, in fact, that I embraced. You know, I'm one of those guys who loves risk. I mean, this whole festival was a risk, you know, we'll come to that later. But whoever thought of having a festival in rural Nasik in the middle
That
of
is
a
true.
vineyard, you know,
That is
so
true.
everything I've ever done is a risk, and I embrace risk.
Okay, so you decided to, get with it. You partnered with, I believe your mentor, who was back in America.
Yes, Kerry Damsky.
Right?
Yeah.
And you began your journey here.
Yeah.
My question
Right
is,
here. This was our first ever vineyard. Right
is it?
here.
Wow.
Sauvignon Blanc. This is the first wine grapes. That's why we're standing at this spot. It's a
Wow.
historic spot. These are the first wine grapes ever to be planted in Nasik. And today, Sula makes 60% of India's wine.
Okay.
And Nasik produces 80% of India's wine. And it all
Wow.
started right here.
but when you started,
Yeah.
were you looking to cater to the elite as, was the notion then? Did you have the idea that you were looking to make wine massy?
You know, I was not thinking about the elite.
Okay, fine.
For sure. I wanted to make simply a small amount of nice, drinkable wine coming from India and proudly made in India. The wine that was there were a couple of wineries, but they weren't really, when you tasted them, you didn't feel any excitement. I wanted to make a wine where you tasted it and you said, oh, that's nice, I'll have another glass. So we started out, in our first year, we made 50,000 bottles.
Okay.
Fast forward to 2016, 10 million bottles.
Wow,
So
okay.
it's quite a
Quite a
journey since then.
Yeah. So, take me through that initial setting up years when you, made your wines.
Yeah.
But they were like, Like 500, 600 cases,
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
a couple thousand cases in the first year.
right?
That's right. Yeah.
And how did you go to market? Because, Indian wine, okay.
Oh, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to persuade a distributor, to persuade retailers, to persuade hotels like the Taj Group, which was our first customer, why they should keep this Indian wine when people wanted French wine.
Yeah.
For example, nobody was interested in Indian wine, so it was very difficult. It took us 6 months to sell 1 truckload of wine.
How much had you priced a bottle?
We started out at about 500 rupees a bottle. There were very high taxes on wine in India, in Maharashtra. So at that time, out of the 500 rupees, something like 150 rupees was just excise duty.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was not so easy.
So you, it took you 6 months, but how did you manage the distribution that you have today, where you were available at every local wine shop?
Well, very painstakingly in the early years, it was a process. I mean, in the first 6 months, 1 year, went door to door myself, account to account, persuading people.
When you say account
tasting,
to account, you were doing corporate or you were doing
no, hotels.
hotels? Okay.
So going and tasting with the Taj, with the Oberoi, with the people at the ITC, the Ambassador Hotel. Indigo Restaurant was
Wow.
our first
Okay.
really cool restaurant in Bombay. Olive was the other really cool new restaurant in Bombay. So tasting with the owners of Indigo and Olive. Of course, it helped a lot that a lot of these other entrepreneurs were friends of mine.
Yeah, sure.
So Rahul Akerkar of Indigo, Rahul and Malini, A.D. Singh of Olive were all friends of mine. And we were all these entrepreneurs together. So that made life a little bit easier.
I believe your big hiccup came in 2008 when the big recession hit us.
Yeah, there were a few hiccups on the way.
Okay.
First was before we even started to get a license. The Maharashtra government, there was a de facto ban on any sort of alcohol and nobody knew the difference
Okay.
between wine and whiskey.
Right.
No difference as far as they were concerned. And so we had to go and persuade them. It took me 2.5 years of persuasion to get a license
Okay.
to make beautiful wine in this beautiful spot.
So what were you doing till then? Just cultivating?
Just going to the excise commissioner's room and sitting down waiting on a horrible bench outside his office for 3 hours until he would deign to see me, and then sitting on a bench outside the excise minister's office until he would deign to see me.
Sure.
And then so many other officials, pollution control, this, that. I mean, my God. The file was this thick to get the license finally. Yes.
At no point did you think this is not worth my time? You had
You know,
a degree,
I had
you could have got a job.
Yes, I had started, but then I had too much to lose. I had my ego to lose.
Okay.
That was the biggest thing for me.
Because
like
bureaucracy
my
can-
self-respect. So I had to do it. I had to go for it.
Okay.
And finally, I met the right people in government who said, okay, this is something interesting, especially after I got my license. And they tasted the wine and they came here and they said, okay, this is something cool. This is something good for the state, for the country, for our farmers, for our rural area, employment. And they saw the light, and then everything changed.
Okay.
So in 2001, the Maharashtra government came out with a very progressive grape processing policy. They couldn't even use the word wine,
Okay.
even at that time, where they slashed the excise duty on wine.
Okay.
So from 150 rupees a bottle, it became 75 rupees a bottle.
Okay.
And then 1 year later, after seeing sales take off, they reduced it to 0.
Okay.
So there was a 0 excise regime on wine in Maharashtra, and that's where the boom started. So sort of 2002 until 2008 were really boom years,
And what was-
we almost doubled our production every year.
But what was your Indian competition like at that time?
So, once we started our operations, a lot of the farmers in this area started to become aware of wine, and suddenly 50 wineries cropped up
Okay.
in Maharashtra with the new liberalized licensing policy,
Sure.
which moved it to the collector level rather than having to go to Mantralaya, the ministry level in Mumbai.
Sure.
And then everything changed. So suddenly you had 50 wineries making wine. But wine is not a thing that you just pluck the grapes and you manufacture. It's not that. It's about art. It's about marketing. It's about packaging. It's about aesthetics. And that was one of the things where I think farmers, growing up in rural Nasik, they didn't have a clue. So a lot of these wineries collapsed as well.
Okay.
And there was opportunity also that came from that.
Okay, fair enough. And then came your big bump in 2008.
Yes, well, 2008 was a bump for the whole world.
Sure.
It was a bump for every single industry that there is, and it was also a bump for wine. So suddenly things, things really collapsed, because until 2007, there was all this easy money going around, all these funds, venture capital, there was this whole startup ecosystem happening, and people were spending a lot on discretionary things, especially more expensive wine. And suddenly in 2008, all of that came to a crashing halt, and our sales fell, especially of our premium wines, by around 20% that year.
But were you manufacturing mass wines then?
No, so that crisis bred its own opportunity, because until then, all the wines that we were making were at 400 rupees and above. And then suddenly we realized one thing, that hey, why not try to make a wine at 200 rupees? Maybe use some table grapes in it, some cheaper grapes, take the benefit of the fact that excise duty is now 0, and there's still some margin, let's do it. So we came out with the first, classic sort of tasting wine at 200 rupees, and it was a big, huge success overnight.
Okay.
That saved the company in a way, because 2008 was very difficult, and from 2009-10 onwards, it took on a new trajectory.
But just to get some sense in terms of how your range does, your bulk of your revenue comes from which range at the moment?
I would say solidly it's what we call our premium range, which is around the 700-800 rupee segment. So it's still fairly expensive.
Yeah,
it's
premium.
not, I wouldn't call it a wine for the masses.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not. It's not like let's say like 60% of your revenue is coming from your bottom end.
No, nothing like that. No, a fair amount of volume does. Obviously, that makes sense because it's a cheaper wine. But in terms of revenue, no, nothing like that. Maybe 25%.
So, I know that you're also now not only just making your own wines, but you're also importing wines. You've also become a distributor of sorts.
Sula is today not just India's biggest wine producer by far, but we're also one of the leading importers of wines.
Right. My question is, I want you to be a little bit objective. I know this is your baby, but how would you stack Indian wines today versus, let's say, what we call the traditional wine capitals of the world? Where do we stack up?
We've come a long way in a very short time, actually. So if you think about it, our journey in just 15 years has been the kind of journey that other wine regions would have taken 100 years for.
Okay.
So we've come a fair way in quality. Our wines, Sula wines, are today on the shelf at Marks & Spencer, one of the UK and the world's greatest food retailers. They have very, very high standards. And we are competing and we are making a profit on those wines. So that's something to say.
You're talking about your exports?
Our exports on the shelf in London.
Is it?
Absolutely. We are one of the few, you can say, food products today that takes India and of course Nasik out to the world, to the tables of the world. Please remember one thing, that you have wine regions out there that are 500 years old, and they have an amazing tradition of wine. So they have a lot of wines that are so amazing, rich, complex, expensive. $1,000 a bottle, for example. I'm not even going to say that we compete on that level. Sure.
Yeah.
The question is important, that at the price that we are selling.
Okay.
Let's say it's $10 a bottle, it's $15 a bottle. How does it compare with other $10 and $15 bottles across the world?
Let's say
and our wines compare very well.
Is it?
Price for price. But we haven't reached that point where we're selling wines at $50 and $100 and $150.
And how long do you think that journey will be until we hit that stage? Would it be in your lifetime?
I never expected, even 5 years ago, that we would be successfully selling a beautiful wine, our Rasa Cabernet, for example, at 1,750 rupees a bottle, as we are today, and it sells amazingly well. So I don't think the day is too far off that we'll be selling a 3,000 rupee wine. That's not too far off at all. Okay. Let's see what happens from there.
Okay, done so far, but I believe you're getting into all kinds of alcohol.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that we did was we did a joint venture with Remy Martin, the famous cognac producer of France, where we decided to make a really high quality brandy, a cognac style brandy, with French technology and all the, it's Janus. We just launched it about a year ago. And so that's our first brandy.
And that's made in India?
It's made in India. It's made right here in Maharashtra. And now that we've made this superb quality grape spirit that's, in line with cognac, basically, we have decided that, okay, why not make some luxury spirits based on the grape rather than the grain. So we have, in fact, launched on that journey.
Your alcohol will be based still with the grape?
Absolutely.
Oh, you're not You're sticking to that. Okay.
Grapes always give you a superior quality of spirit and with a little bit of sweetness to it, which in fact Indian palates enjoy
Yes, that's
compared to grain.
Yeah, yeah. So you're not going to get into, vodka and other liqueurs which do not need, let's say, the fundamental ingredient being.
No, I don't say no to anything.
Okay.
That's not the way I operate.
Okay.
Everything is open and possible. Please remember that there's a very successful grape-based vodka today in the world.
Okay.
Yes, I'm not going to take the name, but it's already been done. So we would not be the first people to do it if we did it.
And give me a sense of what that rollout plan will look like, and under which company would you set up another company?
I want to tell you one thing, that our 95% of our focus is our wine. And we have so much more to do in this wonderful world of wine. Please remember that the consumption of wine is growing at a nice 15 to 20% a year in this country. And I expect that kind of growth to happen for the next decade. So spirits is a secondary emphasis. My emphasis is Sula wine. That's the main thing. And I would be silly to take my eyes off that prize, because we have to still plant 150 to 200 hectares of vineyards, new vineyards every year, just to make that target. Continuously putting up new wineries, building this beautiful like resort like you have right here,
Sure.
which is which is all part of the wine tourism, and that's really our primary focus. We have a company, Artisan Spirits. It's a subsidiary, and that's where we are doing the spirit business.
I've always wondered, and please be free to tell me that that's a very stupid idea, but given the fact that now you have, Sula is a big name, it's actually a household name. You have the Sula Fest that's been running for 10 years, and where you've done
right
wine tourism.
Yep.
So you've opened that up. We see more and more tasting rooms, opening across the country. People are open to it. They're willing to pay top dollar for it at some socio-economic class.
Absolutely, they love it.
Right?
We had 240,000 visitors here at Sula in 2016. It's one of the most visited vineyards on earth. And I throw out this challenge that this is the place where more people in the world taste their first glass of wine than anywhere else. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We have just completed our first acquisition of a vineyard winery just outside Bangalore.
Okay.
Yes. And the fact is, it's 2 hours from Bangalore city. And so expect some new development in that, because
So you're going to replicate this model
I'm
there?
not going to replicate this. I'm going to do something in keeping more with Bangalore and Karnataka.
Okay.
But yes, as far as our expertise, I'm going to replicate our expertise. Yes.
Sure.
So you can expect a nice Sula tasting experience outside Bangalore within about a year.
So tell me, you've been, getting a lot of financing, and what is your current valuation? Would it be at about over 1,000 crores?
Yeah, I think you can say that, but again, we don't comment so much on that.
Okay,
You can
okay.
do your own arithmetic based on like what's happening.
Based on your valuations.
Yeah.
So you just raised some money, and I believe there's also talks of you possibly going public. Is that something that we will see very quickly?
Obviously, there are people saying, oh, of course they're going to go public and all. And let me say, it's not off the table, obviously. And there's one reason why really it's not off the table is because there is no today listed wine play in India. That's obviously, for any fund manager, that would be something a must have.
But if you do, hypothetically speaking, and you've said it's not off the table, why would you want it? What would you do? Why would you need that kind of financing? Where are we looking to go next?
It's about, look, we as a family would love to control this business going forward.
Right, and you already
do, right? But the way
right?
that the expansion is happening, it is very difficult for us to keep our share constant, because we have to keep pumping in, every year the capex is 50 crores to 100 crore rupees. And we can't continue doing that. So we've been taking private equity funds in so far. But then at some point you run the risk of losing control. So we would prefer to have a situation now, probably at some point, that the ownership becomes more broad-based. Samant family and myself continue to lead the charge, with a family of investors. But that's also something for us to discuss and have a consensus with our other investors who have treated us very well so far. I think there would be a lot of people who would say, yes, I would love to be a Sula shareholder. This is a company that has made us proud, that makes India proud, that's going out there, taking the message of the new India across the world. And I hope so.
Fair enough. On that note, Many congratulations for this,
Thank you, Sonali.
Amazing feat that you've achieved, and hopefully going forward with all your, business acumen, we'll see the Sula stocks climbing up very fast on that stock exchange.
I hope so. Please enjoy our 10th edition of Sula Fest today.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.
Bye.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.